A big part of my career has been looking at the therapeutic value of the 12 steps, because the 12 steps really have harnessed some powerful psychological forces that creates an amazing change in our life. What is that change? Well, the truth is that the 12 steps are engineered to help us achieve emotional sobriety, to achieve true independence of spirit, to achieve autonomy, to learn how to take care of ourselves. These are things that we don't know. Emotional sobriety really helps us learn how to have a healthy relationship, how to have union with the preservation of our integrity, how to cooperate with integrity. Most of us get lost in our relationships. Most of us do a lot of things we don't want to do. We don't really know how to show up in a good way. Emotional sobriety is about learning to have healthy relationships. You see, to me, one of the things that happens in our life and in our recovery and the gift that we're been given in recovery is that we regain an interest in ourselves and we regain an interest in our lives like we've never had before. For so many reasons, which are too many to get into today, we get into a very, very stereotyped, fixed position in life. And the truth is, we become bored with ourselves. We see ourselves reacting the same way. We see life going on the same way. Is this all there ever is? And the truth is, it is, until something happens and we go through this shakeup and start to reorganize ourselves and start to coordinate ourselves in a very, very different way than we've ever been coordinated in life. We start to put ourselves back together without such tight, clearances, right? So rigidly. And we start opening up possibilities in our ability to be able to meet life and deal with life and cope with life in a very different way. Instead of demanding life, as Howard said, to be what we think we need it to be, we now focus on how can I meet life and deal with the challenge that life is setting in front of me? We've now taken the cart and put it behind the horse instead of in front of the horse, is what emotional sobriety is about. And that's what we're doing here tonight. And we're continuing that journey. And I'm so glad to hear that you've been with us that long, Howard. I didn't realize that. That's touches me. Well, I'm going to pick up the discussion that Roger started last week. I was just out of surgery a day, and Roger, just as a good friend he is, stepped up for me and took the lead on this chapter about accepting what is. I think this is an incredibly important, not only important chapter in my book, but an important place to get to in our life. But notice it comes later in the book, and for a good reason. We have to lay a foundation with all of the other ideas and work we've been doing to get here. I will review those at some other point because I'm still only about 8 days out of surgery, so you're not going to get me at 100% tonight. I'm probably at, what would you guess, Carol, 60%, 65, somewhere in that range. But I will do my best, and I do have some things that I think are going to be very important and relevant to kick off continue this discussion about acceptance. So let me, first of all, I like to do sometimes is really check my understanding of things, because, one of the things that Don Miguel Ruiz says is in the Four Agreements, don't make any assumptions. And I can make a lot of assumptions about what I think I know, especially about defining words. I'll go back and look up a word and stuff and realize, oh my God, I've had the opposite definition in my mind of what this word really means. It's like I was in AA for like 5 or 6 years before the word lest, L-E-S-T, before I understood what that word meant. I had no idea what that word meant until I looked it up in a dictionary. Well, I looked up acceptance tonight, and here's what I found about acceptance. And this was very informative, and I'm going to underscore why in a second here. Acceptance is the action. And you've heard me say, I write about in my book, acceptance is not a passive thing. It's a very, very active engagement with reality. It's an action of consenting. Now, I never put consent together with acceptance. And we're going to see how that fits here in a minute. It's an action of consenting to receive something or undertake something. I'll say that definition again. Acceptance is an action. It's not a passive thing. It doesn't happen to you. If you are going to accept something in your life, you have to have a very, very active engagement with whatever that issue is that you're struggling with to get to acceptance. So it's an action of consenting. And see, that's where the action takes place, is how do we create consent for to receive something? So when something is consensual, it means I'm giving my permission for that to happen. If Tom says, Alan, may I, knock you over the head with this 2x4? If I say yes, I'm agreeing to Tom hitting me over the head. If I don't want it, I get to say, Tom, I'd rather you not hit me over the head, but if you want to share something you're upset with me about, I'd be very interested in that. So consent means that I am paying attention to my openness and willingness to have that experience. Now, certain things, like if, for me, even this is difficult. Tom says, hey, I know you're having a hard time. Can I bring over some pasta for you to have a meal with you and stuff like that, where you're going through it? It might be easier to consent to that, even though it's a bit hard for me to allow myself to receive. It's much easier to give. We've talked about this in the past too, is that which side of the equation are you on? Are you someone that's easier to take or is it easier for you to give? For me, it's a lot easier, not a little, that was dishonest. It's a lot easier for me to give than to receive. That's why when you guys give me all of this stuff, man, so there's times I just break down and cry that I feel so grateful for what you guys are offering me. But consenting to something that's not given to me from a person, but from an experience. So I want to talk about that, because that's a very different kind of consent, isn't it? Is being willing to accept something about myself that my experience is teaching me is much more complicated than just telling Tom, okay, I'd love to have that spaghetti dinner with you tonight. What makes that consent so much more of a challenge for us? And when is it and when isn't it? So let's use some differentiation. When can I consent to something and receive something? When it fits my idea of who I am or who I think I should be. No brainer. Hey, Al, you're a great guy. Thanks, Tom. That's easy to take in, man. I love it. Please keep telling me what a great guy. Hey, Al, you're full of shit. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Can I give consent to that? What's going to happen if I say, hey, Al, you were really selfish in that, and I got to tell you, it really bugged me that you weren't there for me when I called you the other day and I wanted some time with you and all you could do is talk about yourself and what was going on. Your selfishness makes our relationship challenging for me at times. Wow. Can I receive that and be able to incorporate that into my self-concept? What would interfere with me being able to do that? Well, the first thing is, well, I'm not a nice guy. My God, if I'm selfish, that means I'm not a nice guy and Tom's not going to like me. He won't be my friend and I won't get any more pasta and I'll eventually die from hunger. See, that's catastrophic thinking, isn't it? Do you guys follow that thinking? You guys do that in your life sometimes? Oh my God. He won't bring spaghetti over. From that point on, I will die from starvation. Come on, Alan, listen. That's catastrophic thinking. I'm good at that, by the way. By the way, the smarter you are, the more catastrophic you can get in your thinking. So if you really drive yourself crazy with catastrophic thinking, it means you're quite bright. That's I guess a perk about it. So consent happens when it is ego congruent. When it fits my idea of who I am, or cognitively consonant is another way some social psychologists have talked about cognitive dissonance and cognitive consonance. Ego syntonic and ego dystonic is another way that psychoanalytic people have talked about it. Something that's ego syntonic is something I can accept, no problem. I can incorporate that as an idea about myself, but something that's ego dystonic, I sit with and go, oh, I don't like this, and I don't want to face it, and I don't want to see this about myself. Please, God, don't make this true. I resist it. I refuse to look at it. I justify my behavior. I blame it on someone else. No, it has nothing to do with my trait of selfishness. It's you want too much from me, Tom. That's the problem. You're too much of a demanding friend. It's not that I'm not able to be there for you. It's I can't satisfy you. See, that's the nonsense. It's a game I play is to deflect it from me to him and make it his problem, because what am I doing? I am trying to keep my ego intact, my concept of myself, my self-esteem. Now, we talk about the importance of self-esteem, but this kind of self-esteem that is built on this structure that is based on pseudo self-esteem is based on a concept of self that is unrealistic, is not healthy self-esteem. The self-esteem that we've been promoting and Roger has been talking to us about and I've been talking about is this self-esteem that is much more grounded in humility. When we are able to integrate humility into who we are, it makes this kind of acceptance and consent of facing things about us that are hard to face possible, because we let go of some of these ideas that I have to be a certain way to be okay. As Howard was saying, we go from I'm okay if to I'm just okay even if. I'm okay even if there's two parts of me. There's a good part of me and there's a bad part of me. I'm okay even if I make a mistake. I'm okay even if I fail Tom sometimes and disappoint him. I'm okay if I'm a disappointment. I don't have to be everything to everyone to be okay and to be loved. But how do you get that? Well, you have to challenge some of these ideas that you have about yourself, or I have to challenge these ideas I have about myself. So what is one of the ideas we have to challenge? So here's the big one today. Okay, the takeaway. Every one of you in this room, and I know you're gonna all just hate me in 2 seconds. Get ready. You ready? Just let the hate out, please. Put it in the chat. I hate you. Don't tell me this. Let it go. I won't take any of it personally. Tom helped me. I was in his workshop after this, and so I've got my enterprise shields up at full strength, right? Every one of you claims special status in this world. That's where the problem comes in. You claim special status. You should be different. All of the physical laws, psychological laws, they all apply to everybody else, but they shouldn't apply to you. You should be held in a special status. You should be considered different than everybody else. You should be close to perfect, if not perfect. And everybody should recognize how wonderful you are all the time. No one should ever point out anything that's wrong with you. They should only focus on what's right about you. Everyone should just admire you and adore you. You should be loved unconditionally. That's what you special status claims, all of these things. Things should just go your way because, of course, you deserve it. That's what the part of us that thinks things have to be a certain way for us to be okay, that life has to be what we think it should be. claims. It claims this special status in life. And what happens when life refuses to cooperate with that demand? We know what happens. We object. This shouldn't be happening to me. God, how can you do this to me? I thought you were a good friend, or I thought, look at how hard I worked. Father Richard Rohr calls it, we live life as though it's a meritorious society. We put our quarter in the candy machine and we think we should get the candy bar out. God, I put $2-3 worth of quarters in there. Why is something bad happening to me? Right? Haven't I earned, not, especially now that I'm in recovery, my God, why are you still upset with me over some of the things I did before? Why haven't you forgiven me? Don't you see how wonderful I am? We claim special status. And we're going to continue to claim special status until we get honest with ourselves that that's what we're doing. And you see, if you claim special status, then it's going to be impossible for you to be able to accept things that are important for you to accept if you're going to grow yourself. One of the most important things in emotional sobriety is to see who you're not and to start dealing with that. And I say this all the time, only the best in you can see the worst in you. But that takes what? A release of that special status, a surrendering, a letting go, that you have to be a certain way to be okay. What you're hearing from me is you have to be who you are to be okay, and you have to start accepting who you are. We know from what we've talked about up to this point that acceptance is a prerequisite to any significant transformation and change in your life. It's not going to happen without it. So now that I've got you guys hating me and depressed and saying you were all screwed, so what the hell are we even doing here? Next week, Tom will be passing out lemonade. We're going to go to Jamestown together. No, we're not going to do that. What we're going to pass out tonight is some Kool-Aid that is infused with humility. Because humility is the antidote to this special status. Is when we start to cultivate a sense of humility in our life, we now start to allow what I would call the constructive forces of who you really are, your true force, to start to influence your growth, because you start blocking the obstructive forces of this false self that claims this special status in life. So what is humility? Well, we've defined it before, but let's define it again tonight because it's apropos to this discussion and to our further treatment of this subject as we go on from week to week. First of all, it's a low focus on self. I like how Herb puts it. Look, I'm not the most important thing in the universe, but I am important to me. And that is true. You're important to you. But what our special status does is that we demand that you make me as important as I want you to make me. Not just as I am. That's fine if you do that to yourself. Then you do whatever you do with that. You're not going to put your trip on other people. But we don't do it. We take our trip and we expect everybody to treat us the way we want us to be treated, with special status. Well, good luck with that. Bill talks about it. He talks about it all the time, about we step on the toes of others over and over again, demanding the impossible from them, demanding security, demanding that they consider our feelings and not their own. It's not going to work, no matter what tricks we try. Humility is grounded. And this is where we've got to do the work to establish this humility to be the antidote to this special status. Humility is based on a willingness and the capacity to own and acknowledge our gaps in knowledge. To own and acknowledge our gaps in knowledge. To own and acknowledge and take full responsibility for our mistakes. To own and acknowledge that I have limitations. I know Carol's shaking her head. Carol and I don't do well with limitations. You should see us recovering. We're probably the worst patients in the world. My God, I think I should be back on the tennis court next week. Carol said, "You're only a week out of surgery, Alan. You better slow down." You see, if I can now establish that as the baseline of my life without feeling, see, this is the problem. There's a part of me that says, if I did all that, it means I'm less than. Do you guys get that? See, it's almost accepting who I am means that I'm a less than person. Accepting that that I'm human. These are human characteristics. For me, human was never good enough. Well, how the heck do you live a life when being a human being is not enough and I have to be something other than that? Doesn't work well. I'm telling you guys, I'm here to testify. I can give testimony to that. Do I hear an amen out there somewhere? Carol gave me an amen. My God, it doesn't work. I've created an impossible way of life with this nonsense in my head. And I still struggle, God, my God, you guys you'll hear it about it in the weeks to come. And, with this surgery, I just realized I've had major surgery. They had to cut, it's about a 14-inch incision on my hip because it wasn't a typical hip conversion that takes 45 minutes. They had to pull out of my hip a 6-inch, 12 millimeters in diameter rod that was put in my leg when I was 13 years old. And the mechanism that they had to put in is not the hip that Carol got, which has got about a 2 or 3 inch stem into her femur. I've got a stem that almost goes to my knee because the conversion was so difficult and he had to cut away so much bone. And bone, when it's cut away, hurts, by the way. Ouch. Owie. I've got a bunch of owie going on right now. And, for me, I out of bed and I should be sprinting down the hall. She said to me when first day of PT, "You don't have to go that fast, sweetie." You gotta be kidding me, man. She says, they friggin' timed me. Let's see how fast you can get out of this chair, go to this mark, turn around with your walker and come back. You know what I thought? I'm gonna beat every time that anybody's had in this PT therapy office. I almost fell on my damn face. I made such a fool of myself. Come on, Alan, let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Please, God help me, let it go. Hard to let it go when I've been doing this stuff all my life like this. So accepting these things is the door to freedom. But the part of me that doesn't want to accept them says that this is who I have to be okay. And I've let some of that go, but I'm telling you guys, it's a process. Is getting that at a deeper and deeper level is a challenge. And that's what this is about. We're not going to ever get there. I'm not going to all of a sudden have a practice of emotional sobriety that's perfect, as much as I wish I would. And I wish you would be able to, and we'd be able to just enjoy it. But I think it's going to be, look, one fool holding the other hand's full as we stumble along and pick ourselves up and learn from some of these experiences we have. And if we can create an atmosphere that accepts us in that way, I think we're creating a really powerful community for us to grow together and to fall in love together and to fall in love with life and to do. The final thought I have is to convert the innocence we had that was based on fantasy. And I'm going to say this again, to convert the innocence that we had that was based on fantasy to an innocence that grows out of wisdom and experience. an innocence that will still make us delight in life and look forward to it, but not in that childlike way where we set ourselves up for something that's not going to happen, but that we set ourselves up to create something that's possible. Acceptance will lead us on that path from an innocence based on fantasy to an innocence based on experience. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you for listening. Let me get joined by my good friend Raj. And I don't know if Thom Rutledge is here today. My God, you say the word and he appears. I felt like a magician just then, Tom.
That's right. You didn't even have to say my name 3 times like Beetlejuice.
I did not.
Mhm.
Oh, you guys, what do you think?
You want to kick it off?
I'll be glad to. It's I was listening to Nathaniel Brandon on an audio program called "The Psychology of Self-Esteem." I didn't even know this existed. I don't know if it's a book or whatever, but it's on my Audible stuff. And I was just listening, and he's talking about our ability to, what sets us apart as humans, our ability to use reason, to be rational. And he pointing out that we're not always rational, but we do have that ability. And the point he makes is he differentiates, that from instincts that we do automatically. And he makes the point, in order to use our reason, in order to be rational, we have to make that choice. We have to make the choice to do it, and we have to make the choice to continue to do it when we're doing it. And it seemed like such a gimme when I was first listening to it, but the more I thought about it, I began to have examples in my head when I was not making that choice, and realized that no, it does need to be that conscious choice. And how this leads into what you're talking about, Alan, is the conscious choice. When you talk about, basically who can I trust? Who do I want to hear from about me? If I'm going to hear something back, who can I trust? It's like I don't have to be open to things that feel difficult for me or negative to me. Nobody has to do that. It's like, and nobody has to do it at a certain level, but it's like, I think most of us do choose that. I choose that. It's sort of like, Alan, if I give you, Alan, if I'm working on a writing project and I give you something to read, I give it to you and say, let me know what you think. Okay. Many reasons I might give it to you, but one of the reasons I might give it to you is because I know you're not going to lie to me. I know that even if it sucks, that you will find a nicer way to say it than that, but you will find a way to inform me that this is a problem. You see there's a problem with that. It's basically, I can trust a yes from someone I know will tell me no. Then I can get the truth. So that's one piece of that. The other thing I want to just be sure I represent here is, with this chapter, accepting what is about us. Yeah, we got to deal with our specialness and our ego and that stuff. But we also have to deal with that thing that we haven't talked about in quite a long while. But it's called negative arrogance. It's where we're not special in another way. We're not the worst. We're not the one the one in the group who is less capable than everybody else of doing that. And I really do believe, Jenny Schaefer, who wrote the book Life Without Ed, that we wrote that book together, and we used to do presentations together. And one of the things we used to say in our eating disorder group all the time is, and I'll give you the basis of it. I would say to the group, how many of you in this group, raise your hands, how many of you in this group believe that that the other people in this group can make it recovery? Everybody's hands goes up. How many of you believe that you can make it? No hands go up. So the point is, each one of them is holding themselves special. I am the special one. I am the one who will not be able to make it in this. And so what our line was, we would say to them, you're not that special. And so Jenny and I were giving a presentation one time. I forget where we were, but we were signing books afterwards, and a young woman came up to me, and she liked that a lot, and she said, "Would you sign my book that way?" And I said, she wanted me to write, "You're not that special." And I'm going like, no, you don't want me to do that's not a good thing. It's like she really wanted me to do that. So I can't remember her name. It was just say her name was Ellen. And so somewhere in the world, there is a book of Life Without Ed that has my signature in it that says, "Ellen, you're not that special, Thom Rutledge." So people are looking at this book going, "God, what an asshole." It's like this guy, yeah. But it's such a, it caught on with this group that I was doing because it's so important to do that. And I really do. I'm a big believer that those of us who have the habit of low self-esteem, and it's many things, but it can be habitual, is we have a responsibility, and not just a right, but we have a responsibility to, when we are actually competent at something, when we get better at something, we have a responsibility to own it, to claim it. Not that you don't have to say you're the best in the world. You don't need to go the other way with arrogance, but it's like you need to do that. And one of the ways you do that is if I have competence about something, what I will tell people is you have a responsibility to have confidence about that. Because I worked with a partner of mine. Some of you would know her for a long, long time, who just she was like a bottomless glass when it came to confidence in herself. She was one of the most amazing, wonderful therapists I've ever known, I've ever worked with, and people will tell you that she's just as magnificent. But I was on the inside, basically, I was very often propping her up because she could do wonderful things. People would give her wonderful feedback, and she would still feel horrible about herself and think she was horrible and stuff. And as many of us do this, she was always afraid I was mad at her. And I remember telling her one time, it's like, the only time I get mad at you is when you don't hold on to this good feedback that you get about yourself. And that she's kind of helped me identify that thing where it's like, you're not special in a negative way. And it's like, I think for a lot of us who come from the low self-esteem side, that's the harder thing to accept. Because it's the more foreign thing to accept. It's alien to us in a lot of ways. So we don't know. Sort of like what Alan's talking about receiving versus giving. It's like, I don't know what to do with this. So I'm just saying, so if you're in that place, then that's the next step. We'll talk to somebody. We'll talk about it here. We'll talk about it in therapy, whatever. If you don't know what to do with it, get some help for what to do with it, but don't just reject it and go back to the familiar place of, I am the special one in a negative way. So.
Well, but it's funny though, Tom. See, it's the same special status though.
I'm saying that's what I'm saying. It's the same thing. But
nobody thinks of that. Nobody thinks of that.
You and I are good bookends on that because whenever we're talking about arrogance, you go toward the arrogance, and I immediately correspond and think about my history, going like, oh yeah, I've been arrogant, but
no, but you're right. But see, you call it negative.
I was the biggest piece of shit there going.
I know. That's the negative arrogance. That's the other side.
Yeah. It's like, and neither one of the point is, when you say accepting what is, neither one of those is reality.
I'm the worst or the best, and see either
Alan
side.
and I get a lot of things done when we're talking at the same time. We love to do that. It's we're trying to figure out how to do it in harmony. It's like,
Yeah, we
you know,
gotta do that. You gotta take the fifth note. I'll take the bridge. The fifth.
listen,
The
you know,
chronically
people say they
still-
can't carry a tune. I can't carry a note, not a note. So you don't want me singing with you. So, but anyway, I just the acceptance of that stuff is going to include, you know, I mean, I love the disappointment stuff you said. What I wrote during that was I wrote, humans disappoint. I am human. Therefore, I disappoint. You know, and it's like the idea, you know, we don't want to be disappointing to people, but if you can't think of an example in which you've come up short for people, then you're not looking close enough. You know, and I'm not looking for a way to beat ourselves up. It's just part of our imperfection.
Yeah,
And so I love what you say about that, Alan, because it's like, if we can accept that that's a part of me, that basically it's not, you know, I can respond to, but by, if I'm disappointing you, I can do something maybe to do better, make that up, but I don't have to turn on myself. I don't have to attack myself. I don't have to condemn myself because I'm just being human.
right, man.
That's accepting what is.
Talk about acceptance. That's what the ultimate acceptance.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
Even Carl Jung said, he says, I've spent my whole life climbing this ladder down to meet myself at the bottom of this pit. And I was standing there and I reach out my hand to this person who's imperfect, who's clay and stuff. And I embrace him and say, nice to meet you. He said that's what gave his life meaning. Well, Roger, what do you think about all this, man?
I love hearing you guys talk over each other. And there is a difference in terminology. You just identify both as arrogance, not the one that in common language would be identified as arrogance, but also the other one. But in common language, I think it makes sense to talk about it as like typical arrogance and negative arrogance. We can talk about it that way too. But I'm really
it's
glad
still special status. Yeah,
it's still special status. That's the point you're both making. And that's right. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because as the whole time you were talking about it, Alan, about, you know, I'm entitled to this and I'm entitled to that. And I'm immediately going to the other end of the conversation, like you, Tom. I'm going like, well, what about those of us who feel like total shit a fair amount of the time, and we don't feel like we're entitled to anything, and
don't deserve anything. That's right.
or deserve anything. And it's a real wake up call if we're not used to thinking of it this way. And I'm not saying we set about to do this. I mean, depression is real, as Bill W. talks about it, and we can all talk about it to some degree. And I'm not saying we set out on this mission to do this. You know, it's a response to, you know, experiences that we have in our life, as well as other things. I think there's, you know, genetic components or biological components, you can call them. But it still is a kind of special status that we can get into, whether it's the typical presentation that we would identify as self-centeredness and arrogance and egocentrism, or whether it looks the opposite of that. The universe is out to get me. It's hopeless, and so on.
Yeah.
So, but I enjoyed the heck out of that. Haven't you guys? I haven't experienced you talking over each other like that. A couple other points.
It's just efficient, because we both have a lot to say, so we just do it at the same time.
That's true.
We get a lot more said that way.
In principle, it takes less time, and ultimately,
Very economic.
Ultimately, time is all we have. All right. So,
that's right.
A couple other points I wanted to make. I really like that definition you brought up, Alan. Consent to receive. You brought in the terms openness and willingness. And I want to emphasize, because there's a whole bunch of stuff I didn't get to last week, and talk about accepting what is, and the special slice of that we call self-acceptance, right? But consent does not mean agreement. It sounds like that, but it doesn't mean agreement. It means I consent to acknowledge this reality. I consent to face what is, right? In another person, I can accept things or not accept them that I don't like at all, that I have a very, very different viewpoint about. So that's one sense, and it's in a very important sense in which we are using the term acceptance. It has nothing to do with like and dislike. It has nothing to do with, this is right or this is wrong. It's just about, this is what is. This is what's happening. This is what's real in this moment. That's why, in terms of self-acceptance, we talk over and over about how it's a precursor to change, because elements of ourself that we go to war against, and we're all filled with them because of all that you've heard us talking about all this time. We get these ideas of who we have to be to get the most love and the most approval and the most, sense of belonging and acceptance we can get. And to one degree or another, we either set about on a mission to get that, or we set about on a mission to defy it. Okay. And for a long time in our lives, we tend to go one of those ways or another, until finally enough of us starts to come forward again, where we go like, gosh, maybe there's a me in here that isn't about compliance or defiance, right? Maybe there's a me in here somewhere, if I can only get to know him or her better. But I wanted to make that point. Acceptance is not resignation. Resignation is associated with feelings of defeat, with feelings of discouragement, with feelings of giving up, right? With feelings of depression, loss, maybe. Acceptance is not that. Acceptance, as Alan keeps saying, is an active process of acknowledgement and engagement. Okay, it's an active process of facing what is as best we can. And as you've heard me say countless times, the best starting point for me most of the time is what I won't accept, right? What we mislabel resistance, but that is what it looks like from a certain point of view. But that's usually the best starting point for me, is the parts of me that don't want to accept it, and beginning to just talk out loud and acknowledge them first to myself and then to others as well. That's often the very best place I can begin, because that's how I start to break up the shoulds, right? So you said so much, Alan. It was very rich, unbelievable to me, the level of pain that you're in. And you and I talked earlier today, and I know you're in a hell of a lot of pain, that you can still come up with this kind of a presentation, man. So kudos to you, and we'll see what some other people have to say. We only have a few minutes now, so I will stop.
Thanks, Raj. Thanks, everybody. Let's let Tom in. Let Tom share. It's his birthday today. Let's celebrate that first before we go on. Let's take a minute and acknowledge you, Tom. Acknowledge you for all kinds of things. First of all that you've done to help this meeting turn into what it's become. It would not have evolved this and be as sophisticated as it has become today without you. So kudos to you for that. Also, an acknowledgement for how you show up as authentic and as real and as transparent as you can be. Your recovery speaks for itself, and you're a great example of what it means to be a man with dignity in recovery. So I'm glad to have you, call you my friend.
Well,
So
thank you very much.
Tom, is this your card? Yes, thank you. All right, thank you. All right.
So yesterday, Valentine's Day is my sober anniversary, 35 years ago. I walked into a rehab because I wanted to beat a drug charge and get people off my back and figure out how to smoke and drink successfully. And I found out a lot more in that rehab about addiction and all that stuff. And it was a huge relief. What for me though, it was 10 years of fumbling around, right? Like not realizing the connection between abstinence and recovery and emotional recovery and responsibility for my own recovery. I was claiming special status. You would act out this way too if you had my parents and my upbringing, and as I started to, I guess, embrace the real recovery around 6 and 7, a lot around the humility of 6 and 7, around the humility of making amends even when I thought you owed me more, And forgiveness for my, abusers and my parents, and letting go of all that. And then finding Bill's letter and finding Alan's recordings, and like there was such a freedom of being wrong, right? It's like, oh, wow, I was wrong about that. Like I was so fixed in a lot of my concepts and perceptions, and stuck to my story. It's just a huge relief to be able to, grow and experience this stuff. The one thing which I wrote down while you were talking, Alan, was I'm reading one of Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Voice of Knowledge. He talks about we are the secondary character in other people's lives, right? It's like, just as everyone is a secondary character to me, I'm the secondary character in other people's lives. But I want special status with them, right? You talked about special status. Like I also want you to think of me in special status. And so I've got, and I put that expectation of special status in other people. You should treat me better because you're my mom, my wife, my friend. And wow, starting to set aside all those old ideas, just such a relief. I get to react rather than respond rather than react, and just get a little bit of space between the shoulds and the demands, and react a little bit easier today.
Does someone need to believe in God to successfully overcome addiction? Well, the way I like to think about what the program does, it connects us to who we really are. And what does that mean? Well, there's this incredible force in you and I, this growth force. It's the force that moved us from crawling to walking. You wanted to take those first steps. And when you fell, and you fell a lot of times, you didn't let your failures stop you. You picked yourself up, you learned from it. And how many times did you fail before you walked? You failed as many times as you needed to. You see, that force, I call it a biological imperative, a psychological imperative, a spiritual imperative. It's moving you towards wholeness. It's moving you to be what you can be. Just like in the acorn is all the information it needs to become an oak tree. In you is all the information you need to become you. Become a you that can cope with life and to deal with whatever you need to deal with to be okay. And that's what I'll talk about in my new book, The 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety.